Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of history's most underestimated torture chambers, the medieval laundry house. Picture this, it's 4 a.m. Still pitch black outside, and you're already awake. Not because you want to be, but because if you're not at that well hauling water before the other laundry workers arrive, you'll be fighting over buckets until sunrise. Your hands are already cracked and bleeding from yesterday's work, wrapped in strips of cloth that do absolutely nothing to protect you from what's coming. The air smells like wood smoke, wet wool, and something chemically sharp that makes your eyes water before you've even started your shift. You probably won't survive TSAT, at least not with your skin intact or your back functional. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm curious, where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it there? Drop your location in the comments. It's always wild to think some of you are winding down while others are just starting their day. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing outside a stone building that's already leaking steam through every crack in its walls. And the sky above you is that deep purple-black that comes just before dawn. This isn't some quaint cottage industry you're walking into. Medieval laundry houses, especially those serving castles, monasteries, or wealthy households, were industrial operations that processed hundreds of pounds of fabric every single week. You're not doing a gentle load of delicates here. You're facing linen shifts soaked in body odor, wool tunics crusted with mud and worse, and table linens stained with wine, grease, and the remnants of medieval feasts that would make a modern health inspector weep. The first person you see is Agnes, the head laundress, and she's already scowling at you. She's maybe 40 but looks 60, with hands so deformed from years of this work that her fingers barely bend anymore. Her forearms are covered in white scars, chemical burns from the lye soap you'll be making later. She doesn't greet you with words, just points toward the well with a gnarled finger, and you understand immediately. Water. You need water. Mountains of it. You grab 2 wooden buckets, each one holds about 3 gallons when full, and start walking toward the well. It's 100 yards from the laundry house, which doesn't sound like much until you remember you'll be making this trip about 40 times today. The buckets have iron handles that bite into your palms even when they're empty. By the time you've filled them and started the walk back, those handles feel like they're cutting through to the bone. Here's something modern people don't really grasp. Water was heavy, scarce, and the foundation of everything in a laundry house. You couldn't just turn on a tap. Every single drop had to be hauled by hand, and a proper washing day for a large household required somewhere between 200 and 400 gallons. That's roughly 600 to 200 pounds of water that needs to be carried, bucket by bucket, before the sun even rises. Your shoulders are already burning by trip number 3. The well itself is ancient, lined with moss-covered stones that make the whole operation slightly terrifying. You're lowering a bucket on a rope into darkness, listening to it splash somewhere far below, then hauling it back up hand over hand. There's no pulley system here. Those were luxuries reserved for monastery wells or royal estates. You're doing this with raw muscle, and the rope is rough enough that you can feel new blisters forming even through the cloth wrappings on your hands. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly understood the connection between water quality and health, but the smart laundresses knew that well water worked better than river water for certain tasks. River water was softer, which meant it needed less soap, but it also carried silt and sometimes strange smells. Well water was harder, full of minerals that made soap less effective, but it was cleaner. And when you're washing a bishop's underlinens, cleanliness matters more than efficiency. You haul another pair of buckets back to the laundry house, sloshing water across your already soaked shoes. Medieval laundry workers didn't have waterproof boots. You're wearing leather shoes that will stay wet for your entire shift, which means by midday you'll have trench foot starting to develop. But that's a problem for future you. present you just needs to keep moving. Inside the laundry house, other workers are starting to arrive. There's Thomas, a boy of maybe 12, who's been doing this since he was 8. His job is fire management, keeping the flames under the massive cauldrons at exactly the right temperature. Too hot and the fabric scorches. Too cool and nothing gets clean. He's already covered in soot, and the shift hasn't officially started. There's also Margaret, who's pregnant with her 4th child and still hauling buckets because medieval maternity leave wasn't a thing. You'll watch her work a full shift today, bending over washing stones with a belly that looks ready to burst, because the alternative is not eating. The laundry house itself is designed with brutal efficiency. It's usually a single large room with a dirt or stone floor that's perpetually wet. There's a massive hearth along one wall where the cauldrons sit, and along the other walls are benches covered with tools, wooden paddles for stirring, beating stones for pounding fabric, and strange-looking implements whose purposes you haven't learned yet. The ceiling is low and heavily stained with smoke and steam. There are small windows high up, but they don't provide much light, just enough to create dramatic shafts of steam-filled air that would look beautiful if you weren't about to suffer in them for 16 hours. You're still hauling water when the sun finally cracks the horizon. Your arms feel like they might detach from your shoulders. You've lost count of the trips, but the massive wooden trough near the cauldrons is finally full, which means Agnes might stop glaring at you. Here's a quirky detail that most people miss about medieval laundry. The water temperature was a subject of intense superstition and folk wisdom. Some laundresses insisted that water drawn at dawn was sweeter and cleaned better. Others believed that water touched by moonlight the night before held special properties. These weren't just old wives' tales, they were the medieval version of quality control in a world without thermometers or chemical testing. You didn't have pH strips to test your water, so you developed elaborate rituals and beliefs to convince yourself you were doing it right. The actual washing won't start for another hour. First, you need to sort the laundry, which arrives in huge woven baskets that smell like a medieval version of a gym lockriff. That gym locker had been sealed for a month and occasionally used as a bathroom. You're pulling out garments and trying to categorize them. White linen separate from colored, delicate church vestments away from sturdy work clothes, heavily soiled items in their own pile. Your nose is running from the smell, and you're breathing through your mouth, which only makes you taste the air, a mistake you won't make twice. Agnes is barking instructions now, her voice raspy from years of inhaling wood smoke and lye fumes. Mind the altar cloths, girl. One mark on those and the priest will have both our heads. You nod, carefully setting aside the embroidered linens that took some hundreds of hours to create. The irony isn't lost on you that this beautiful handwork will survive, but your hands probably won't. The social hierarchy in a laundry house was strict and bizarre. The head laundress, like Agnes, wielded absolute power over her domain. She decided who worked on what, who got breaks, and who faced punishment for mistakes. Below her were the experienced washerwomen who handled the delicate items. Then came general workers like you, doing the grunt work. At the bottom were the children and the elderly, assigned to tasks like wringing out small items or hanging wet fabric. Everyone knew their place, and stepping out of line meant getting assigned to the worst job, rendering fat for soap, which we'll get to later, and trust me, you're not ready for that nightmare. You're finally sitting down for half a second, wringing out a cloth to rewrap your hands, when Agnes drops a bombshell. Today we're doing the Lord's bedding. Your stomach drops. Bedding means massive item sheets, blankets, heavy woolen coverlets that weigh 50 pounds when dry and triple that when wet. You're going to be wrestling with fabric that outweighs you, trying to get it clean without tearing it, because torn bedding comes out of your wages. What wages? The handful of coins you might see at the end of the month. If you're lucky, the other workers are exchanging glances. Everyone knows that bedding days are when injuries happen. Last month, a woman named Joan got her hand caught in a wringer pressing a wet blanket. Her fingers were crushed, and she can't work anymore. There's no workers' compensation in 1347. There's just poverty and starvation waiting for anyone who can't physically perform this labor. But here's the thing that makes this all so much worse. You can't quit. If you're a serf working in the Lord's laundry house, this is your mandatory service. If you're a free worker, you've probably already been paid in advancia common practice that essentially trapped you in debt bondage until the job was complete. The medieval labor market wasn't kind to people who broke contracts. You could be fined, imprisoned, or branded as unreliable, which meant never working again. The pre-dawn darkness is finally giving way to gray morning light, and you can see your breath in the air mixing with the first wisps of steam from the cauldrons that Thomas has started heating. Your back already aches from the water hauling. Your hands are raw. Your feet are soaked and cold. And the actual washing, the real work hasn't even begun. Agnes is moving through the sorted piles of laundry now, making notes on a wooden tablet with a piece of chalk. She's documenting every item because noble households kept meticulous inventories. If a tablecloth goes missing, someone will pay for it, and that someone won't be the Lord. She holds up a white linen shirt and examines it in the growing light, her face twisted in disgust. Blood and wine, she announces, needs the special treatment. You don't know what special treatment means yet, but the way she says it makes your skin crawl. The room is getting warmer now as the fires build. Soon it will be sweltering, a suffocating heat that makes the air thick and hard to breathe. You'll be working in this steam-filled hell, your clothes soaked through with sweat and water, for the next 15 or 16 hours. There's no air conditioning, no fans, no relief except for maybe a cup of weak ale at midday if Agnes is feeling generous. You watch the sky outside the high windows shifting from gray to pale blue, and you realize this might be the last time you see daylight until evening. Once the real work starts, you won't have time to look up, won't have energy to think about anything except the next bucket, the next beating stone, the next piece of fabric that needs to be punished into cleanliness. The medieval laundry house doesn't care that you're tired. It doesn't care that you're in pain. It just demands, endlessly, that you produce cleanliness from filth using methods that will destroy your body in the process. Agnes claps her hands, a sharp sound that makes everyone jump. Right then, she says, her voice cutting through the growing noise of fire and steam, "Let's get started. And mind you, remember, the lady wants her linens back by Thursday, so we've no time for your laziness. Thursday is 3 days away. You have no idea how you're going to survive the next 3 hours, let alone 3 days. The first lesson of the day is about to scar you literally." Agnes waddles over to a corner of the laundry house you haven't paid much attention to yet, where there's a wooden barrel that looks like it's been gnawed by rats and a smaller pot sitting over its own dedicated fire. The smell hits you before you're even halfway there. Caustic, sharp, and weirdly meaty all at once. Your eyes start watering immediately, and you instinctively step back. But Agnes grabs your arm with those twisted fingers and pulls you forward. "Lie," she says, pointing at the barrel. "The backbone of everything we do here, and if you're stupid enough to touch it with bare skin, you'll be crying for a week." You peer into the barrel and see a grayish liquid that looks deceptively harmless, like dirty dishwater. This, Agnes explains with the enthusiasm of someone describing their favorite weapon, is wood ash Leith medieval cleaning agent that made laundry possible and laundry workers miserable. Here's how this nightmare gets made. You take wood ash from the fires, pile it into a barrel with small holes drilled in the bottom, then pour water through it repeatedly. The water leaches out the potassium hydroxide from the ash, dripping through into a collection pot below. What you end up with is a solution so alkaline it can strip the oil from your skin in seconds. Historians still argue whether medieval laundresses understood the actual chemistry of what they were making, but they definitely understood the danger. Lye burns were an occupational hazard so common that most experienced laundry workers had permanent scars mapping their forearms like a horrific sort of job resume. The really unlucky ones, those who got splashed in the face or eyes, often went partially blind. There was no workers' safety board, no protective equipment requirements. There was just the understanding that if you wanted clean fabric, someone's skin was going to pay the price. Agnes is already moving on to the next component, and this is where things get truly medieval. She points to a large pot that's been simmering over the fire, and the smell coming from it makes the lye seem pleasant by comparison. Tallow, she announces, rendered down yesterday, needs mixing with the lye to make soap. You step closer and see a pot of melted animal fat, mostly sheep and pig, with maybe some beef tallow if the household recently slaughtered cattle. It's a yellowish-white liquid covered in a film that shimmers in the firelight, and it smells exactly like you'd expect liquefied animal fat to smell. Greasy, rancid, and vaguely death-adjacent. This fat has been collected over weeks from kitchen scraps, meat preparation, and butchering, then rendered down by heating it slowly to separate the usable fat from the chunks of tissue and membrane. Those chunks are floating on top right now, and Agnes casually schemes them off with a wooden paddle, flicking them into the fire where they hiss and spit. Watch close, she tells you, picking up a long wooden stick. This is where girls lose fingers. She starts ladling the lye from the barrel into the pot of hot tallow, and immediately the mixture begins to react. It bubbles and steams, releasing fumes that make your throat burn. Agnes stirs constantly, her movements practiced and precise, keeping the mixture from boiling over while ensuring it combines properly. This is saponification, the chemical reaction between the alkaline lye and the fatty acids that create soap. The medieval laundresses didn't call it that, obviously, but they knew the ratios by heart. Too much lye and the soap would be too harsh, eating through fabric along with dirt. Too little and it wouldn't clean effectively. You're handed a stirring stick and told to take over. The pot is heavy, the mixture thick, and within 30 seconds your arms are screaming from the effort of keeping everything moving. The fumes are making you dizzy. Your eyes are streaming tears. A small splash hits your forearm, just a tiny droppletan. The pain is instant and shocking. It feels like someone pressed a lit match against your skin. You drop the stick instinctively, trying to wipe the soap off, which only spreads it and makes things worse. Agnes grabs your arm and plunges it into a bucket of clean water, her grip iron-strong despite her deformed hands. Never wipe it, she snaps. Always rinse. Remember that or you'll have no skin left by summer. She pulls your arm out of the water, and you can see the damage. A red welt already forming, the skin slightly puckered where the soap ate into it. This is from a droplet. You're going to be working with gallons of this stuff. Here's a quirky historical detail that makes this even more unsettling. Some medieval soap recipes included other ingredients that supposedly improved cleaning power. Wealthy households might add sweet-smelling herbs to mask the rancid fat smell. Monastery laundries sometimes incorporated wine or vinegar to adjust the alkalinity. And some regions, particularly in areas with access to specific plants, would add saponins from soapwort or other natural surfactants. But the base was always the same: caustic lye and rendered animal fat, mixed in proportions that were passed down through generations of scarred, broken-handed women who learned through trial, error, and pain. The soap making continues for another hour. You take turns stirring while Agnes supervises, occasionally adding more lye or more fat to adjust the consistency. The mixture gradually transforms from a bubbly, dangerous liquid into a thick, paste-like substance that clings to the stirring stick. This is soft soap, not the hard bars you're familiar with from modern life, but a semi-solid gel that will be scooped out and used directly on fabric. Margaret waddles over, her pregnant belly leading the way, carrying a basket of something that looks like dried grass. "Brought the soapwort," she says, dumping it next to the soap pot. Agnes nods approvingly and explains to you that, for the really delicate fabrics, the silk vestments, the fine linen veilsteel use a gentler soap made with soapwort plant instead of the harsh lye and tallow mixture. The soapwort gets boiled in water to release its natural saponins, creating a mild cleaning solution that won't destroy expensive fabric. Of course, it also doesn't clean very well, which means delicate items require hours of gentle agitation and multiple washes. Everything in the medieval laundry house is a trade-off between effectiveness and destruction. You're finally done stirring, and Agnes allows you to step away from the soap pot. Your arms feel like jelly, your throat is raw from the fumes, and you've acquired 3 more chemical burns despite your best efforts. The head laundress scoops some of the finished soap into a smaller wooden bucket and hands it to you. "This is your bucket for the day," she says. "Mind you don't waste it. Soap costs money, and it comes out of wages if you're careless." The bucket is surprisingly heavy, maybe 20 pounds of soap that took hours to make and will be gone by midday. You're already doing the mental math on how many buckets the laundry house must go through in a week and feeling a creeping horror at the realization that someone has to make all of this. The rendering, the mixing, the stirring. The Burnsit's a full-time job just producing enough soap to keep the laundry operation running. Thomas, the boy managing the fires, has been heating water in the massive cauldrons while the soap making was happening. He's using a long wooden pole to test the temperature, dipping it in and then touching it to his chica method that seems insane but apparently works. "Ready for washing," he calls out, his voice cracking in that way 12-year-old voices do. Agnes nods and starts directing traffic, pointing workers toward different stations. You're assigned to the general washing area, long wooden trough filled with hot water that's already starting to steam. Agnes dumps an armload of soiled clothing into the water, then takes a chunk of soap from your bucket and crumbles it in. The soap dissolves into a cloudy, greasy film on the water surface, and the smell of wet wool mixed with rancid fat fills your nostrils. This is the moment where modern sensibilities completely fail you. You're supposed to plunge your hands into this hot, soapy, caustic mixture and start scrubbing. The water is hot enough to be painful, and the soap immediately starts attacking your skin. You can feel a tingling sensation that turns into burning within seconds. The cloth wrappings on your hands provide exactly zero protection. You're pulling out a linen shirt and rubbing it against itself, trying to work the soap into the fabric. And the whole time your hands are being chemically scoured along with the cloth. Next to you, an older woman named Edith is working with the focused intensity of someone who's done this 10,000 times. Her hands are so damaged they barely look human anymore. Swollen joints, white scar tissue, fingernails that have been dissolved down to nubbins. She notices you staring and gives you a gap-toothed grin. "Give it 5 years, love. You'll have hands like mine." And then the pain stops because the nerves are dead. She says this like it's a good thing, like you should be looking forward to the day when your hands are so damaged you can't feel them anymore. The scrubbing technique is harder than it looks. You have to agitate the fabric enough to loosen dirt without tearing it. Linen is strong when dry but surprisingly fragile when wet, especially the fine, expensive stuff. Wool is even trickier. Scrub too hard and it felts, shrinking into a useless mat. You're learning this through trial and error, with Agnes swooping in periodically to smack your hands away from fabric you're about to ruin. "Gentle with the Lord's shirts," she shouts. You want to explain to him why his collar's torn? Here's something that would shock modern people. Medieval laundry workers often washed items that hadn't been washed in months. Underwear, outer garments, bedding. These weren't weekly wash items for most people. Clothing was expensive, and excessive washing was thought to weaken fabric. So people wore things until they were visibly soiled or started to smell unbearable. By the time garments reached the laundry house, they were encrusted with sweat, dirt, food stains, and bodily fluids that had been accumulating for weeks or even months. You're not just washing clothes, You're excavating through geological layers of filth. The water in your trough is already turning brown, and you've only cleaned maybe 3 items. Agnes appears with a bucket of fresh hot water and dumps it in, diluting the filth slightly but also releasing a fresh wave of steam that makes the air even harder to breathe. The laundry house is heating up now as the morning progresses. The fires under the cauldrons are roaring. The steam is thick enough to blur your vision, and you're sweating through your own clothes while washing someone else's. Margaret is working next to one of the big cauldrons, using a long wooden paddle to stir boiling sheets. This is the heavy-duty washing method. For items that are really filthy or need sanitizing, you boil them in soap and water for hours. She's leaning over the cauldron despite her pregnancy, stirring with a rhythm that suggests she could do this in her sleep. Every few minutes she hooks the paddle under a piece of fabric and lifts it out slightly, checking the color of the water dripping off. Runs clear. It's clean, she explains when she catches you watching. Still brown. Needs more time. You turn back to your own washing, pulling out another garment from the trough. It's a woolen tunic, and the moment you lift it, you realize something horrifying. It's not just dirty. It's lousy. Actual lice are crawling out of the seams, fleeing the hot water and soap. Some are making their way up your arms. You drop the tunic with a yelp, trying to brush the bugs off. And this time Agnes doesn't scold you. She just hands you a different stick. Beat them off first, then wash, she says matter-of-factly. Should have checked before it went in the water. The lice situation is so common that there's an entire protocol for it. Heavily infested items get taken outside and beaten against a wall or rock to dislodge as many bugs as possible. Then they go into the hottest water you can manage, boiling if possible because heat kills the eggs. Then they get inspected again, because missing even a few nits means the whole household gets reinfested. It's a war of attrition that the laundry workers are slowly losing, one bite at a time. Your hands are pruning now, the skin wrinkled and soft from the hot water, which only makes the chemical burns worse. The soap is finding every tiny cut and crack, burning its way into flesh that's losing its protective barriers. Edith was right, you can't imagine doing this for 5 years. You can't imagine doing this for 5 more hours. But here's the thing about medieval laundry work. It was one of the few jobs available to women that paid actual money. Yes, it destroyed your body. Yes, it was dangerous and painful and soul-crushing. But it was also semi-reliable income in a world where women's economic options were severely limited. You could be a laundress, a servant, a field worker, or if you had no other choice, something worse. So women showed up every day, plunged their hands into caustic soap, and slowly traded their physical health for the ability to feed their children. Agnes is making another batch of soap now, and the whole process starts over. The caustic lye, the rancid tallow, the dangerous mixing. The laundry house needs a constant supply because soap doesn't just clean the fabric, it gets used up, dissolved into the water, absorbed into the cloth, lost to the endless cycle of washing. By the end of the day, you'll have gone through multiple buckets of the stuff, each one representing hours of rendering and mixing and chemical burns. The morning is wearing on, and you're only maybe a quarter of the way through the washing. Your back aches from bending over the trough. Your hands are screaming in pain. Your lungs feel coated with soap fumes and steam. And Agnes is already bringing over the next basket of soiled laundry. Because in a medieval laundry house, there's always more. There's always another lord's shirt that needs to be perfect. Another altar cloth that must be spotless. Another load of bedding that weighs as much as a person and needs to be wrestled into cleanliness. You plunge your damaged hands back into the hot, soapy water and pull out the next item. It's going to be a very long day. Your hands are already destroyed. Your back is already aching. But Agnes has decided you're ready for the next circle of laundry hell. The beating stones. She leads you outside to an area behind the laundry house where the ground is permanently damp and covered in a suspicious greenish slime. There's a long wooden bench here, and mounted on it are several smooth, flat stones about the size of dinner plates. These are your new worst enemies. Washing gets the easy dirt out, Agnes explains, wringing out a heavy linen sheet she's just pulled from the trough. Beating gets out everything else. She slaps the wet fabric down on one of the stones with a sound like a thunderclap, picks up a wooden paddle, basically a cricket bat with a longer handle, and proceeds to absolutely brutalize the sheet. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Water sprays everywhere with each hit. The fabric jumps and ripples under the assault. She keeps this up for maybe 2 minutes straight, then flips the sheet and starts again on the other side. You're handed your own paddle and a soaking wet pillowcase that weighs about 10 pounds. Start gentle, Agnes warns. You'll know if you're doing it right when your shoulders want to fall off. This turns out to be less of a joke and more of a precise medical prediction. The technique seems simple enough. Lay the wet fabric flat on the stone, grip the paddle with both hands, and bring it down in a controlled swing that drives the water and remaining dirt out of the fibers. Except nothing about this is simple. The paddle is heavier than it looks, solid oak, waterlogged from years of use. The wet fabric keeps sliding around on the stone. And the angle matters tremendously. Hit wrong and you're either doing nothing or you're about to tear a hole in something that costs more than you'll earn in a month. Your first swing is pathetic, a weak tap that barely displaces any water. Agnes snorts. Harder. You're not patting a baby's back. You swing harder, and this time the paddle connects with a satisfying thwack. Water spraying out in a corona around the impact point. Your shoulders immediately inform you that they were not designed for this motion. Again, Agnes commands. 20 more times, then flip it. By the 5th hit, your shoulders are burning. By the 10th, they're screaming. By the 20th, you're convinced that your arms are going to detach from your body and you'll spend the rest of your life as a torso with legs. But the pillowcase is noticeably cleaner, the water running off it slightly less brown, and there's something grimly satisfying about literally beating dirt out of fabric. Here's what historians love to debate about medieval laundry techniques: whether this violent beating actually cleaned better or just became tradition because it looked like hard work. Some scholars argue that the mechanical action of pounding fabric was genuinely effective at loosening particles trapped in the weave, especially in linen and hemp textiles. Others suggest it was mostly theater, a way for laundresses to demonstrate to their employers that they were truly laboring for their wages. The truth is probably somewhere in between. But right now, with your shoulders on fire, you don't particularly care about the academic discourse. You flip the pillowcase and start on the other side. Thomas, the fire boy, has wandered over to watch, and he's grinning at your obvious suffering. First day's always the worst. He offers helpfully. By tomorrow, you won't be able to lift your arms at all. He's 12 and he's already developed the medieval worker's gallows humor, the understanding that your job is going to hurt you, might kill you, and there's nothing to do but laugh about it. Next to you, Edith, remember her, with the destroyed hands, is working on a heavy wool blanket. She's not even looking at what she's doing anymore, just swinging the paddle in a rhythm that's probably worn grooves into her muscle memory. Thwack flip, thwack flip, thwack flip. She's been doing this for 30 years, and her shoulders are so overdeveloped they look like a different species of anatomy. You'll build the muscle, she says, noticing your struggle, or you'll break, one or the other. The beating bench area is designed with a specific kind of medieval engineering that's both clever and cruel. The stones are set at a slight angle so water runs off into a drainage channel rather than pooling. Behind each stone is a low wall that catches the spray and reflects it back down, keeping workers soaked but preventing water waste. The bench itself is at exactly the wrong height, too high to comfortably reach while standing, too low to work while sitting. You're stuck in an awkward half-crouch that puts maximum strain on your lower back while your shoulders do their own screaming. Whoever designed this understood ergonomics just well enough to make everything worse. Agnes brings over the next item, one of the Lord's linen shirts, the kind of garment that required weeks of skilled labor to make and costs more than most people see in a year. This needs the soft treatment. She instructs. Same beating, half the force. You look at the paddle in your hands and try to imagine half the force when your arms are already shaking from exhaustion. But you understand the threat underneath her words. Damage the shirt and you're not just getting yelled at. You're potentially getting fired, fined, or worse. The soft treatment is actually harder than the regular beating because you have to maintain control through every swing. Too hard and you risk tearing the delicate fabric. Too soft and you're not actually cleaning it. You have to find this perfect middle ground while your muscles are failing and sweat is dripping into your eyes. It's like being asked to perform surgery while running a marathon. Here's a quirky detail that rarely makes it into history books. Medieval laundresses developed superstitions about beating rhythms. Some believed that fabric cleaned better if you beat in patterns of 3. Others insisted you had to work clockwise around the garment for good luck. There were songs and chants designed to keep rhythm, passed down from older workers to younger ones. These weren't just silly traditions, they were coping mechanisms. Ways to turn mindless physical labor into something that felt like skill or craft. When your job is to hit wet cloth with a stick for 12 hours, you find meaning wherever you can. The shirt takes forever. You're working in careful, controlled swings, watching water spray out with each hit, seeing the fabric gradually lighten as the embedded dirt gives up its hold. Your shoulders have moved beyond pain into a kind of numb throbbing that you suspect might be permanent. Flip the shirt. 20 more beats. Flip again. Check the watercolor. Still slightly gray. Keep beating. Margaret has finished her work at the cauldron and joined the beating bench crew, maneuvering her pregnant body into position with practiced ease. She's working on sheets, the massive linen rectangles that covered the Lord's bed, and she's hitting them with enough force to make the whole bench shake. Baby likes the rhythm. She jokes, patting her belly between swings. Probably thinks it's a heartbeat. The other women laugh, but there's an edge to it. Everyone knows Margaret shouldn't be doing this work in her condition, but everyone also knows she doesn't have a choice. The sun is climbing higher now, and the outdoor beating area is starting to heat up. There's no shade here, just wooden benches, wet stones, and workers slowly cooking in the late morning sun while they pound fabric into submission. Your clothes are soaked through with a mixture of sweat and spray from the beating. Your shoes, already wet from the morning's water hauling, are now making obscene squelching sounds with every shift of weight. A new horror emerges as you work. Splinters. The wooden paddles are old, the handles worn smooth in some places and rough in others. Despite your wrapped hands, you can feel splinters working their way into your palms with each swing. Small ones at first, just annoying pinpricks. But as you continue beating, as the wet wood rubs against your skin over and over, those splinters drive deeper. By midday, you'll have dozens of them, and by evening, your hands will be too swollen to easily remove them. Most workers just leave them in until they work their way out naturally or fester badly enough to cut open. Agnes appears with another basket, this one filled with table linens from what must have been an elaborate feast. The cloths are stained with wine, both red and white grease spots from roasted meats, candle wax drippings, and mysterious dark splotches that could be anything. These need special attention before beating, she announces, which makes your heart sink. Special attention means more work, different techniques, probably more pain. She demonstrates on a wine-stained section. Instead of beating it immediately, she pours fresh lye directly onto the stain, lets it sit for a moment while the caustic liquid eats at the wine, then begins a gentler beating to work the lye through the fabric. The wine stain lightens but doesn't disappear completely. Second treatment after this, she says. Maybe third, quality linens deserve quality effort. The subtext is clear: your effort better be quality, or there will be consequences. You're working on a candle wax stain now, and this requires yet another technique. Agnes has you stretch the fabric tight across the beating stone. Then she uses a heated knife pulled from the fire and still glowing slightly to melt the wax, which she then scrapes off with the blade's edge. It's delicate, dangerous work. Too much heat and the fabric scorches. Too little and the wax doesn't melt. The heated knife passes within inches of your fingers, and you're very aware that one slip could cost you a digit. Historians still argue whether medieval laundry techniques were more effective than early modern methods, but there's no question they were more labor-intensive. Every stain required individual attention, specific techniques, and often multiple treatments. There were no chemical stain removers, no oxygen bleaches, no spray and wash solutions. There was just knowledge passed down through generations of women who'd spent their lives fighting fabric-based battles against dirt, wine, blood, and grease. The beating continues. Your pile of finished items is growing: pillowcases, shirts, small linens, but the pile of waiting work isn't shrinking. If anything, it's getting larger as items finish their time in the washing troughs and get brought out for beating. The medieval laundry operation is like a horrible assembly line where you're both the worker and the machine, slowly being ground down by the relentless pace. Thomas rings a bell, actually a piece of metal suspended from a rope, and everyone stops mid-swing. Midday, he announces, and there's a collective sigh of relief. Break time. You drop your paddle and try to straighten up, but your back has locked into the half-crouch position. It takes several agonizing seconds to stand fully upright, and when you finally manage it, your spine produces a series of cracks that sound like breaking kindling. The break consists of sitting on the wet ground. There are no chairs, no benches reserved for workers, and drinking weak ale from a shared wooden cup. There's also bread, hard and dark, probably several days old. You're so hungry that it tastes like the finest meal you've ever had. Your hands shake as you tear off a chunk, and you notice that several of your fingernails are starting to lift from the nail beds, probably from the combination of chemical burns and physical trauma. That's going to be excruciating later, but right now you're too exhausted to care. Agnes doesn't sit. She's walking among the finished items, inspecting each one with the critical eye of someone who knows her work will be inspected in turn by the household steward. She holds a pillowcase up to the sun, looking for remaining stains or thin spots. She finds only faint yellowish mark you somehow missed and brings it back to you. Again, she says flatly, and this time, see with your eyes, not your hopes. You haul yourself up, retrieve your paddle, and take the pillowcase back to the beating stone. Your shoulders scream in protest. Your back joins the chorus. But you lay out the fabric, find the stain, and start beating again. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The mark lightens. A few more hits and it's gone, or at least invisible to any eye except Agnes's. You wring it out one more time and add it back to the finished pile, silently praying she won't find another flaw. The break is over too soon. Everyone returns to their stations, picks up their paddles, and the symphony of thwacking resumes. You're working on one of the Lord's bedsheets, now a massive piece of linen that takes both you and Edith working together to manage. You're beating in alternating rhythm, your swings falling in the gaps between hers, water spraying in coordinated bursts. It's almost meditative, if meditation involved destroying your body one swing at a time. Your mind starts to wander as the repetitive motion takes over. You think about the Lord sleeping in these sheets, completely unaware of the violence required to make them clean. You think about the feast where these table linens got stained, the wine flowing freely while you were probably eating scraps. You think about how your entire day, your entire life, maybe revolves around cleaning up after people who'll never know your name. Thwack, another swing. Another spray of water. Another microscopic amount of dirt beaten free from fabric that will just get dirty again. The medieval laundry house is a Sisyphean nightmare, and you're only partway through day one. Agnes is walking toward you with a wooden bucket, and the smell hits you before she's even halfway across the beating area. It's ammonia sharp, eye-watering, unmistakable. Your brain knows that smell from modern bathrooms and cleaning products, but your nose wasn't prepared for its medieval concentration. She sets the bucket down with a slosh, and you can see the liquid inside. Pale yellow, slightly cloudy, and absolutely, definitely human urine. The best cleaner God ever made. Agnes announces with the pride of someone revealing a trade secret. Better than any soap for certain stains, and it's free if you know how to collect it. Here's the thing that makes medieval laundry truly alien to modern sensibilities. Urine wasn't just used occasionally or as a last resort. It was a cornerstone chemical in the cleaning process, valued specifically for its ammonia content and used so extensively that laundry houses and fuller's shops had dedicated collection systems. Some operations bought urine from public toilets. Others had workers and their families contribute to communal collection barrels. In some cities, there were actually street-side collection pots where men could urinate for a small fee, with the contents sold to laundries and tanneries. You're staring at the bucket with undisguised horror, and Agnes laughs a raspy, phlegmy sound. "Oh, you're too fine for piss. Are you? Wait until you see what it does to a wine stain. Then tell me you're too good for it." She picks up one of the table linens you struggled with earlier, the one with the red wine stain that wouldn't fully lift. She dunks it directly into the urine bucket, swirling it around like she's making soup. The chemical reaction is actually fascinating, if you can get past the visceral disgust. The ammonia in aged urine, and yes, this isn't fresh. It's been stored for weeks to concentrate, breaks down tannins and certain organic compounds that soap alone can't touch. The wine stain you've been fighting for an hour starts to lighten almost immediately. Agnes pulls the linen out, wrings it over the bucket to save every drop of her precious urine, then takes it to the washing trough for a rinse. When she holds it up afterward, the stain is 90% gone. "Your turn," she says, pointing at another wine-stained cloth. "You're supposed to put your already destroyed hands into a bucket of aged human urine. The splinters in your palms are going to love this. The chemical burns from the lye are going to absolutely celebrate. You take a breath through your mouth. Breathing through your nose is not an option, and plunge the stained fabric into the bucket. The ammonia fumes are immediate and intense. Your eyes water instantly. Your throat closes up in protest. The urine is warm, not body temperature, but not cold either, because it's been sitting in the sun. You can feel it soaking through the cloth wrapped around your hands, touching your skin, finding every microscopic cut and abraded spot on your fingers. The sensation is exactly as horrible as you imagined, possibly worse. You're swishing the fabric around like Agnes showed you, trying not to think about what you're doing, trying not to calculate how many people contributed to this bucket. Medieval urine collection didn't discriminate male, female, child, sick, healthy. It all went into the same barrels. You're essentially washing fabric in a concentrated solution of an entire community's waste products. And the worst part is that it's actually working. The blood stain on this particular linen is fading before your eyes. Edith has moved to a different station, and she's working with an even more specialized urine treatment. She's got white linen altar cloths laid out on a wooden frame, and she's using a brush to paint urine directly onto stains, letting it sit for precise amounts of time before rinsing. Church linens need the gentle touch, she explains. Can't go dunking the bishop's vestments in the piss bucket, can we? Well, we could, but then we'd be explaining ourselves to the priest, and nobody wants that. Here's something that rarely gets discussed in polite historical circles. The urine economy was substantial enough that it affected urban planning and social structures. In medieval London, There were designated urine collectors who went door to door with carts. In Paris, certain public latrines sold their contents to the highest bidder. The fullers' guild cloth workers who cleaned and thickened wool fabric were known for maintaining the largest urine collection operations, but laundry houses ran a close second. Some entrepreneurs got wealthy from the trade, which tells you everything about medieval priorities. Thomas has been sent to fetch more urine from the household's collection barrel, and he's struggling with a sloshing container that weighs almost as much as he does. Some splashes onto his legs, and he doesn't even flinch. By the age of 12, he's so desensitized to the smell and substance that it might as well be water. He tops off Agnes's working bucket and hauls the rest to storage a cool corner of the laundry house where multiple barrels of aged urine sit like the world's worst wine cellar. You're working on your third urine-soaked item when Margaret shuffles over, her pregnant belly preceding her like a battering ram. She's carrying a basket of soiled clothing that looks particularly challenging, heavily stained work tunics, probably from stable hands or kitchen workers. These need the full treatment, she says. Grease, sweat, God knows what else. Urine soak, then soap beating, then if we're lucky, they'll be wearable. The full treatment means the items go into a larger trough that's half filled with urine. Not diluted, not mixed with water, just straight aged urine. The clothes get submerged and left to soak while the ammonia works its chemical magic on the embedded oils and proteins. They'll sit there for hours, which means by evening you'll be fishing out urine-soaked wool and linen, wringing them out by hand, then moving them to the soap washing stage. Your hands are going to smell like a medieval urinal for days, possibly weeks. There's no amount of washing that completely removes the scent once it's in your skin. Historians still argue whether medieval people were genuinely unbothered by the smell or simply had no alternative and learned to tolerate it. Contemporary accounts from wealthy visitors to laundry houses describe the ammonia stench as overwhelming, visible as a sort of haze in the air. But the workers, they barely mentioned it. Either their sense of smell adapted, which is medically possible, or they were so accustomed to unpleasant odors in general that urine didn't register as particularly offensive. Medieval cities smelled like open sewers, tanneries, and animal slaughter. Maybe a bucket of aged piss was just another Tuesday. Agnes is now demonstrating an even more specialized technique, using urine to bleach and brighten white linens. She's got altar cloths stretched across a wooden frame in direct sunlight, and she's periodically sprinkling them with urine from a small bowl, using her fingers to flick the liquid across the fabric. The combination of ammonia and sunlight, what we now know as a basic form of photochemical bleaching, gradually whitens the linen. It takes hours of this process, repeated applications, constant monitoring, and it absolutely reeks. The finest linens in Christendom, Agnes says with genuine pride, gesturing at the urine-soaked altar cloths gleaming in the sun. The bishop himself commented on their brightness. She doesn't mention that the bishop probably doesn't know his sacred linens achieved their holy whiteness by being repeatedly doused in human waste products. Some knowledge is reserved for those who do the actual work. You're pulling your hands out of the urine bucket, and they're wrinkled beyond recognition, pruned from hours in various liquids, stained yellowish from the ammonia, dotted with chemical burns that are now being thoroughly disinfected in the most unpleasant way possible. Agnes hands you a wine-stained napkin, one of the Lord's personal dining linens. This one's special, she warns. Imported fabric, fine weave. If you ruin it, you'll wish you'd never been born. The pressure is immense. You lower the delicate napkin into the urine, watching the ammonia immediately start working on the wine stain. You're afraid to agitate too much, afraid to leave it too long, afraid to pull it out too soon. Medieval laundry work isn't just physical labor, it's constant high-stakes decision-making where every choice could result in punishment, financial ruin, or worse. A quirky detail about medieval urine use: different sources were sometimes preferred for different tasks. Morning urine, the first of the day, was considered strongest and most concentrated. Children's urine was thought to be gentler for delicate fabrics, a belief that led to some truly unfortunate collection practices. Some laundresses swore by their own urine for the finest work, claiming they could control the quality through their diet. There was an entire folk science around urine gradations that would seem insane if it weren't for the fact that, chemically speaking, some of these distinctions actually mattered. The napkin comes out of the bucket, and the stain is gone. Completely, miraculously gone. You rinse it in clean what-era luxury, given how precious clean water isn't hold it up to the light. The fabric is pristine, restored to its original white. For a brief moment, you feel something like accomplishment. Then Agnes hands you another stained cloth, and another, and another. The pile never shrinks. Margaret is at the large urine trough now, using a wooden paddle to stir the soaking work clothes. She has to lean forward to reach properly, her belly pressing against the edge of the trough, and you can see the strain in her face. Nobody offers to help. Everyone has their own tasks, their own quotas to meet. The medieval workplace doesn't have much room for solidarity when you're all competing for the same scarce wages. You're watching her struggle when you notice something moving in the urine trough. At first you think it's just the clothes shifting, but then you see it clearly: maggots. The trough hasn't been cleaned in who knows how long, and something, probably food residue from the clothes. Maybe organic matter in the urine itself has attracted flies, which laid eggs, which have now hatched. Margaret is stirring maggot-infested urine like it's a normal Tuesday, because in the medieval laundry house, probably is. Don't just stand there. Agnes snaps at you. The grease stains won't clean themselves. She's pointing at a basket of kitchen workers' tunics, each one dark with embedded fat and oil from months of cooking. These need what she calls the heavy soak submersion in the hottest urine available, because heat activates the ammonia more aggressively. You're heating urine now. You're standing over a small cauldron, bringing human waste to a near boil, watching steam rise that smells exactly like you'd expect boiling urine to smell. The fumes are so intense they make your previous exposure seem pleasant. You're breathing through your mouth, but that just means you're tasting it, which is somehow worse. Your eyes are streaming tears. Your throat is burning. And Agnes is standing behind you saying, "Hotter. It needs to be hotter." The grease-stained tunics go into the hot urine, and the results are admittedly impressive. The heat-activated ammonia starts breaking down the oils almost immediately. You can see the grease lifting, floating to the surface of the urine in yellowish globules. It's working, truly working, and you understand why medieval laundresses relied on this technique despite the horrific conditions. When your job is producing cleanliness and your tools are limited, you use what works, no matter how disgusting. Edith has finished with the altar cloths and moved to a technique you haven't seen yet: urine fulling for wool items. She's got a woolen tunic laid out on a wooden board, and she's working urine into it with her feet, stomping and kneading like she's making the world's worst wine. Cleans and tightens the weave, she explains between stomps. Makes wool more weatherproof. Her feet are bare. Shoes would absorb too much urine and be ruined, and they're so stained and hardened from years of this work that they look almost leather-like themselves. The afternoon is wearing on, and you've lost count of how many items you've treated with urine. Your hands permanently smell of ammonia now, a scent that's worked its way into your skin at a molecular level. Your nose has given up trying to filter the air. Your gag reflex has been suppressed into submission. You've crossed some threshold where the horror becomes routine, where dunking fabric into aged human waste is just another task on the endless list. Agnes brings you fresh cloths to wring out from the soaking trough, the ones that have been marinating in urine for hours. They're heavy, dripping, and they smell so strongly of ammonia that your eyes water just from proximity. You wring them out, the liquid running through your fingers, splashing onto your already soaked clothes. Some gets on your face. You don't even wipe it away anymore. What's the point? The medieval laundry house has broken you, and it's not even evening yet. The heating cauldrons have been simmering for hours now, and you're about to learn why Thomas's job as firekeeper is both the most important and most dangerous in the entire operation. Agnes is directing you toward the massive iron pots. Each one holds maybe 50 gallons of water mixed with soap and various cleaning agents. The water inside is boiling, sending up clouds of steam that make the entire laundry house feel like you've walked into a dragon's mouth. Bedding day means boiling, Agnes announces, gesturing at a pile of the Lord's sheets that have already been through the initial washing and beating. Only way to get them truly clean and kill whatever's living in them. She's not being metaphorical about the living in them part. Medieval beds were ecosystems of their own: lice, fleas, bedbugs, mites, and things that probably don't have names yet. Boiling was the nuclear option, the only reliable way to sanitize fabric in a world without chemical disinfectants. Thomas is managing 3 cauldrons simultaneously, each one over its own fire. He's using long wooden poles to adjust burning logs, pulling them out or pushing them deeper to control the temperature. His face is bright red from the heat, soaked with sweat, and he's got burn scars running up both arms, small circular marks where embers have popped out and landed on his skin. He's 12 years old, and he's already more scarred than a soldier. Agnes hands you a wooden paddle different from the beating paddle. This one is longer with a flatter end and points at the nearest cauldron. Stir. Constant motion keeps the fabric from scorching on the bottom. Stop stirring and you'll burn a hole through the Lord's best sheets, and then we'll see how you like being beaten yourself. She's not joking. Damaging expensive fabric could result in corporal punishment, fines that would take months to pay off, or immediate dismissal without wages owed. You approach the cauldron and immediately the heat hits you like a physical wall. It's not just warm, it's the kind of heat that makes your skin feel like it's tightening, like you're being slowly cooked along with the laundry. The steam rising from the boiling water is thick enough to obscure your vision. You can barely see the fabric churning inside, just dark shapes moving in the roiling water. You lower the paddle into the cauldron, and the first thing you learn is that boiling water creates resistance. The paddle wants to float, the fabric wants to tangle around it, and the whole operation requires constant muscular effort just to keep things moving. You start stirring a figure-8 pattern that Agnes demonstrates, and within 30 seconds your arms are shaking. Within a minute, sweat is pouring down your face, mixing with the condensed steam until you can't tell what's your own moisture and what's from the air. Faster, Agnes barks, the bottom sheets catching. You stir faster, feeling the paddle drag against something heavy, the waterlogged bedsheet trying to sink and settle against the hot iron. You hook it with the paddle and lift, bringing it to the surface briefly before it sinks again. The motion is exhausting, and you've only been doing it for 2 minutes. This goes on for hours. Here's what makes cauldron work particularly nightmarish: the proximity to open flames. The fires underneath aren't small, controlled burners. They're roaring blazes of hardwood that need to be hot enough to keep 50 gallons of water at a rolling boil. Thomas is feeding logs into them constantly, and every time he does, sparks fly up. Some land on the wet stone floor and die. Others land on your clothes, your skin, your hair. You're developing a collection of tiny burn marks that you won't even notice until later, when the adrenaline wears off and the pain catches up. Margaret has taken over the second cauldron, and watching her work while pregnant is like witnessing a medieval workplace safety nightmare in real time. She's leaning over the boiling water, stirring with the same practiced motion as everyone else, but her center of gravity is all wrong. Her belly makes her lean forward at a dangerous angle, and she's constantly adjusting her stance to avoid losing balance. One slip, one moment of dizziness, and she's face first into boiling water. Nobody comments on this. It's just how things are. The steam is getting thicker, and breathing is becoming a challenge. The air is so saturated with moisture that each breath feels like you're drowning. Your lungs are working overtime, trying to extract oxygen from air that's probably 50% water vapor. The laundry house has transformed into a sauna designed by someone who hates humanity. The temperature is probably well over 100 degrees, and you're doing hard labor in it. Thomas is suddenly shouting, "Fire's spreading," and you look down to see that embers have caught on a pile of dried fabric waiting to be washed. Flames are licking up the side of the basket, and there's a moment of pure panic where you realize the entire laundry house could burn down in minutes. Everyone drops what they're doing and rushes over with buckets of water, the precious water you spent all morning hauling. You're throwing it onto the flames, soaking everything in a 6-foot radius, and finally the fire dies down to smoking char. Agnes is furious. Who put dry linens near the fire? Who? Nobody answers. Could have been anyone. The laundry house is crowded and everyone's moving in organized chaos. She settles for glaring at all of you collectively. Next time we might not catch it. Next time we burn. And then nobody works. Nobody eats. Mind your stations. The reality of medieval fire danger isn't just about the building burning, it's about losing your livelihood, your income, your ability to survive. You're back at the cauldron, stirring, and your arms have progressed from shaking to outright trembling. The wooden paddle feels like it weighs 50 pounds. Every rotation of the figure-8 pattern sends pain shooting through your shoulders. Remember those shoulders you destroyed at the beating stones? They haven't forgotten. The heat is making you dizzy, and you're starting to see dark spots at the edges of your vision, which is probably a sign of heat exhaustion, but there's no time to address it. Historians still argue whether medieval workers understood the medical dangers of heat exposure, but the evidence suggests they recognized the symptoms even if they didn't understand the physiology. Laundry houses and smithies places with extreme heat had higher rates of worker collapse during summer months. Some operations would start earlier in the day to avoid peak heat, but that just meant waking up at 3 a.m. instead of 4. The work had to be done regardless of weather, regardless of worker comfort, regardless of safety. Edith has joined the cauldron team, taking over the third pot where she's boiling wool items. Wool requires a different technique, entirely too much agitation, and it felt turning into a useless mat. Too little and it doesn't clean. She's using a gentler stirring motion, almost a rocking movement, and she's constantly checking the water temperature by flicking droplets onto her forearm. If they sizzle instantly, it's too hot. If they just sit there, it's too cool. She's using her own damaged skin as a thermometer, and it's apparently more reliable than any tool available in 1347. A new horror emerges. You need to remove finished items from the boiling cauldron. Agnes demonstrates with a hooked pole, fishing around in the roiling water until she snags something. She lifts, and a massive bedsheet emerges, steaming and dripping boiling water. She swings it over to a wooden rack, trying to drape it without touching the scalding fabric. Some of the boiling water runs down the pole, heading straight for her hands. She releases and jumps back, the sheet half on the rack, half dragging on the floor. "Your turn," she says to you, and you're holding the hooked pole, staring into the cauldron like it's the mouth of hell. You can see shapes moving in their fabric, churning in the current created by the boiling. You thrust the hook down, feel it catch on something, and pull. The resistance is immediate and enormous. Waterlogged fabric weighs exponentially more than dry, and when it's boiling hot, you can't just muscle through. You have to be smart about leverage and timing. You're pulling. The pole is bending under the weight, and something is emerging from the water. It's a wool blanket, and it must weigh 80 pounds in its current state. Boiling water is cascading off it, splashing onto the stone floor, sending up steam where it hits. Some splashes onto your leg, and the pain is instantaneous, a scalding burn that makes you gasp. But you can't drop the pole because the blanket will sink back down and you'll have to fish for it again. You swing the pole toward the drying rack, trying to mimic Agnes's technique. But the weight is too much. The blanket slides off the hook and lands half in a basket, half on the floor. Boiling water spreads across the stone. Agnes is yelling something, but you can't hear her over the ringing in your ears, possibly from heat exhaustion, possibly from the constant background roar of boiling water and fire. Again, Agnes's voice cuts through. You hook the blanket and try again, this time managing to get it mostly onto the rack. Your arms are screaming. The burn on your leg is throbbing. You've been at the cauldrons for maybe 20 minutes, and you've got hours ahead of you. Thomas is having his own crisis at the fires. One of the cauldrons is boiling too vigorously, the water churning so violently that it's splashing out onto the flames, creating dangerous clouds of steam. He's pulling logs out with his bare hands, or rather, hands wrapped in wet cloth that provides minimal protection. You watch him grab a burning log, toss it aside, grab another, his face twisted in concentration and pain. He's been doing this for 4 years. He might make it to adulthood. He might not. Here's a quirky historical detail. Some medieval laundry operations used a 2-cauldron system where the second pot contained water mixed with ashes or other alkaline substances. Items would boil in soap water first, then get transferred to the alkaline bath for a second boiling. This created cleaner results but doubled the danger and labor. Wealthy households could afford this double boil luxury. The laundry workers paid the price in burns and exhaustion. You're stirring again, maintaining that figure-8 pattern that's becoming burned into your muscle memory. Your vision is swimming from the heat. Sweat is dripping off your nose into the boiling cauldron, instantly vaporizing. You're losing water faster than you can replace it. Dehydration is setting in, making the heat exhaustion worse. There's ale available during breaks, but breaks are few and far between, and the ale is weak and warm and barely helps. Margaret makes a sharp gasp, and suddenly she's sitting down hard on the wet floor. Her face is pale despite the heat, and she's cradling her belly. Edith rushes over, checking her with the practiced hands of someone who's seen this before. Baby's fine. She's just overheated. Edith announces, "Get her some water. Get her into the shade." But there is no shade in the laundry house, and the only water available is needed for the washing. Margaret ends up sitting against the wall, still inside the steam-filled building, recovering enough to get back to work because taking a real break means lost wages. The cauldrons keep boiling. You keep stirring. Thomas keeps feeding fires that occasionally try to spread to places they shouldn't. The heat becomes a physical entity, a presence that pushes down on you, making every movement require extra effort. Your clothes are soaked through not with water from washing but with your own sweat. Salt is crystallizing on your skin. Your lips are cracked. You're probably dangerously dehydrated. But the work continues. Agnes is fishing more items out now, and she's moving faster than before. There's a rhythm to Ithuk. Lift, swing, release, hook again. She makes it look almost graceful, this dance with boiling water and scalding fabric. You try to match her pace with your own cauldron, but you're clumsy, slow, and you keep splashing yourself with water that's hot enough to cook meat. The afternoon sun is coming through the high windows, and instead of providing relief, it just adds more heat to the already unbearable atmosphere. The laundry house is catching direct sunlight, the stone walls radiating heat inward. It's like being trapped inside an oven that's also a steam room that's also a workplace safety violation waiting to happen. Edith has finished her wool boiling and moved to a specialized task: boiling linen in lye-enhanced water for extra whitening. This is the most dangerous cauldron because the lye makes the water even more caustic. Splash regular boiling water on yourself and you get a burn. Splash lye-enhanced boiling water and you get a chemical burn on top of a thermal burn, a combination that can leave permanent scars or eat through to the bone. She's stirring carefully, keeping the paddle movements small and controlled. The altar cloths, she explains, noticing your attention. Bishop wants them white as snow. This is how we make miracles. The white linens churning in her cauldron are gradually getting brighter, the lye and heat working together to bleach the fabric. It's genuinely miraculous. If you ignore the fact that achieving this miracle might cost Edith her eyesight if one wrong splash hits her face. You're pulling more sheets from your cauldron, and you've developed a technique sort of. You're still burning yourself regularly, but you're getting better at the hook and swing motion. The sheets are coming out actually clean, the boiling having done its work killing any organisms and lifting out the last stubborn dirt. They're too hot to touch, so they sit on racks steaming, waiting to cool enough for the next stage of processing. The wind shifts, and suddenly smoke from the fires is blowing directly into your face. You're coughing, eyes streaming, unable to see the cauldron in front of you. You keep stirring because stopping means scorched fabric means punishment, even though you're essentially working blind. Thomas is shouting something about adjusting the logs, and gradually the smoke clears enough to see again. Your leg burn from earlier is starting to blister. You can feel it through your soaked clothesitite, hot sensation that's different from the general heat exhaustion. That's going to get infected unless you can clean it properly. But cleaning it properly requires water you don't have time to spare and medical knowledge that doesn't really exist in 1347. Most likely it'll fester, you'll develop a fever, and you'll either recover or you won't. Medieval workplace injury management was mostly hoping for the best. The cauldrons keep boiling, relentless and hungry. You feed them fabric, and they return it clean but try to claim a piece of you in the process of burn here. A scalding there, maybe some permanent lung damage from the steam. The medieval laundry house is a machine that runs on human suffering, and you're just another component being slowly consumed. Agnes is holding up a linen tablecloth to the light, and her face tells you everything you need to know. This is going to be a problem. The cloth is covered in stains wine, grease, something dark that might be blood or might be gravy or might be something you don't want to identify. She's already muttering to herself, running through a mental checklist of treatments that sounds like a medieval spell book. Right? She says, turning to you with the cloth draped over her arm. This is where you learn that washing is the easy part. Stain removal, that's the art. That's what separates women who just push water around from women who actually earn their wages. She spreads the cloth on a wooden table that's stained with decades of failed experiments and chemical accidents. We start with identification. Tell me what you see. You peer at the fabric and catalog the damage. Red wine stains clustered around one corner, grease spots scattered across the middle, candle wax drippings near the edge, and several mysterious dark patches that could be anything. Each stain requires a different treatment, different chemicals, different techniques, and you're expected to know which is which, despite having never done this before. The wine first, Agnes decides. Already hit it with urine, didn't fully lift. That means we go to the salt and wine treatment. She produces a wooden bowl containing white wine, not drinking wine. You notice, but something that smells like it's gone slightly off. Fresh wine for old wine stains, she explains. Seems backward, but the acid in the wine helps break down the tannins from the red. Then we pack it with salt to pull the liquid out. She demonstrates, pouring the white wine directly onto the red stain, letting it soak for a moment, then dumping what looks like half a pound of precious salt onto the wet spot. Salt wasn't cheap in medieval times, it was a valuable preservative and seasoning. Using it for laundry was a luxury that only wealthy households could afford, which meant if you wasted it or used too much, came out of your pay. Now we wait, Agnes says. Salt needs time to work. Meanwhile, the grease. She moves to a different stain, pulling out a small clay pot from her collection of supplies. Pipe clay, she announces, showing you a pale gray substance that looks like wet chalk. Absorbs grease better than anything. We pack it on thick, let it dry, then brush it off. The grease comes with it, usually. Here's where medieval stain removal becomes almost alchemical. The pipe clay treatment requires judging the exact moisture content of the clay, the age and type of grease stain, the fabric weave, and the ambient humidity. Too wet and the clay spreads the grease. Too dry and it doesn't absorb. Agnes is working purely by feel, learned over decades of trial and error, spreading the clay onto the grease spots with her twisted fingers. What about the blood? You ask, pointing at one of the dark stains. Agnes frowns. That's not blood. Blood turns brown when it's old, and this is too dark. That's ink, probably, which means we're in trouble because ink doesn't like to leave. She pulls out yet another container, this one holding what looks like milk. Buttermilk, she confirms. Sometimes works on ink, sometimes doesn't. We'll try it and pray. Historians still argue whether medieval laundry workers had actual chemical knowledge or just accumulated folk wisdom through generations of observation. The truth is probably both. They couldn't explain why acid broke down tannins or why clay absorbed fats, but they definitely knew it worked. They'd developed a practical chemistry that was surprisingly sophisticated, even if their theoretical understanding was wrapped in superstition and religious explanation. You're watching Agnes work through the stain arsenal, and it's genuinely impressive. For candle wax, she uses the heated knife technique you saw earlier, melting the wax carefully and scraping it away. For mysterious stains of unknown origin, she has a test sequence. Try urine first, then soap, then various acids like vinegar or wine, then give up and declare it permanent. Each treatment is applied with the precision of someone who knows that mistakes are expensive. Edith has joined the stain removal station with her own problem clothon altar cloth with what appears to be wine mixed with honey, creating a sticky, dark mess. Festival day spill, she explains. The chalice tipped during communion. Got honey wine all over the cloth. Been trying to clean this for 3 days. She's got the cloth soaking in warm water mixed with wood ash lye, a treatment that's gradually lightening the stain but also threatening to weaken the delicate linen fibers. The problem with honey, Agnes lectures, apparently deciding this is teaching moment, is it caramelizes. Heat it wrong and the sugar burns into the fabric permanently. So we work cold or barely warm, use acid to break down the sugar, then soap for the wine tannins, then pray the fabric survives. She's describing a process that could take days, might not work, and could easily destroy the item entirely. Margaret has appeared with a basket of children's clothing, the Lord's children, specifically, and every single item is disaster. There's food stains, mud, what appears to be berry juice, and several suspicious dark patches that suggest medieval toilet training was not going well. The nurse says these need to be spotless by tomorrow. Margaret announces wearily, the lady wants her children presentable for visiting nobles. The collective groan from the stain removal team tells you everything about how realistic that timeline is. Children's clothing in medieval times was basically a catalog of every substance that could possibly stain fabric. Kids played in mud, ate with their hands, wiped faces on sleeves, and generally treated clothing as a combination toy and napkin. Getting these items truly clean would take a week. They have until tomorrow. Agnes starts triaging. The berry stains boiling water immediately, might set them if we wait. The mud dry it first, then beat it out, then soap wash. The food stains depends what food. The other stains urine soak and prayer. She's assigning tasks rapidly, dividing the basket among workers. You get 3 items that look like they've been used to clean up after a medieval feast. Your first item is a linen shirt with an oil stain, probably from a lamp or cooking fat. Agnes hands you a jar of something that smells faintly like turpentine. Oil of turpentine, she confirms. Dissolves oil stains, also dissolves skin, So mind your fingers. You're applying caustic solvent to fabric with your already destroyed hands, watching as the turpentine breaks down the oil stain. It's working, genuinely working, but the fumes are making you dizzy and you can feel the chemical burning its way through the cloth wrapping on your fingers. Here's a quirky detail about medieval stain removal. Some treatments were based on genuine chemical principles, while others were pure superstition that happened to occasionally work. For example, using urine on stains worked because of ammonia, but some laundresses swore that urine collected during a full moon was more effective, which was nonsense except that full moon nights were often clearer, which meant workers could see what they were doing better, which improved results. The superstition got credit for what was actually just better lighting. Thomas has been sent to gather special supplies for stain removal, and he returns with an armload of bizarre items. Stale bread, for erasing light marks on fabric. Eggshells, crushed into powder for gentle abrasion. Lemon juice, acid for certain stains. And actual bull's gall, bile from a slaughtered cow, which somehow works on grease stains. The medieval stain removal toolkit looks like ingredients for a witch's potion. And honestly, that's not far off. Agnes is working on the ink stain with buttermilk, and it's not going well. The milk is drawing out some of the ink, but it's also spreading it, creating a larger, lighter stain instead of a small dark one. She's frowning, muttering, trying to decide whether to continue or switch tactics. Might try the salt and lemon method, she says finally. Burn a hole in the fabric or clean the stain either way. It'll be different. The salt and lemon method is exactly what it sounds like. Pack the stain with salt, then squeeze fresh lemon juice over it. The combination of acid and abrasive creates a reaction that can lift ink or eat through the fabric, depending on concentration and timing. Agnes is mixing the treatment in her palm, creating a paste, then spreading it carefully on the ink stain. Now we wait and hope we still have fabric when this is done. Edith has given up on her honey wine stain using conventional methods and has moved to the nuclear option. Strong lie. She's applying it with a brush, literally painting the caustic substance onto the altar cloth. The fabric is starting to lighten. You can see the stain fading, but you can also see the linen fibers beginning to break down. It's a race between removing the stain and destroying the cloth. Medieval stain removal was often about choosing the least bad outcome. You're working on a grease stain now, using the pipe clay method Agnes demonstrated. You're packing the gray clay onto the fabric, trying to match the consistency she achieved. But it's harder than it looks. Too much pressure and you push the grease deeper into the weave. Too little and the clay doesn't make contact. Your clay application looks nothing like Agnes's smooth. Even coating yours is lumpy, uneven, probably going to work about half as well. Let it dry completely. Agnes instructs, moving down the line to check everyone's work. She stops at your clay application, frowns, but doesn't comment. Either it's acceptable or she's given up on expecting quality from you. Hard to tell which. Margaret is battling berry stains with boiling water, and it's a delicate operation. She's holding the stained fabric taut over a wooden frame, then pouring boiling water from a height, letting gravity and heat work together to flush out the berry juice. It's actually working. The purple stain is lightening with each pour, but it requires steady hands and perfect aim, because splashing boiling water on yourself is a given, and splashing it on someone else gets you fired. The stain removal station is starting to look like a medieval chemistry lab. There's containers of urine, wine, vinegar, turpentine, milk, lemon juice, and various powders and pastes. There's fabric stretched on frames, soaking in bowls, packed with clay or salt, waiting for chemical reactions to complete. The smells are layered and complex. Acid, ammonia, grease, soap, turpentine, and underneath it all, the ever-present scent of wet fabric. Agnes is explaining another technique to you, this one for removing rust stains from when metal buckles or pins bleed onto white fabric. Lemon juice and salt again, she says, but this time you put it in direct sunlight. The sun helps the acid work faster. Takes hours, sometimes days. You just keep applying lemon salt, letting it sit in sun, checking progress. She shows you a cloth that's been through this treatment. There's a faint yellowish shadow where the rust stain was, but it's mostly gone. Acceptable for house linens, she judges. Not good enough for church or noble wear. The children's clothing is proving to be a nightmare. As expected, every item requires multiple treatments. One shirt has food stains, mud, and oil all in different areas, meaning 3 separate processes. The clothing is delicate cauldrons where for nobles was often made from finer fabrics than adult clothing, so aggressive treatment isn't an option. You're working with gentle soap and patience, trying to coax out stains that have been setting for days or weeks. Here's something that rarely gets mentioned in history books. Medieval laundresses developed regional specialties in stain removal based on local resources. Areas near the coast used different techniques than inland regions. Places with access to specific plants or minerals developed unique treatments. Agnes's methods are specific to this area, this household, this particular set of resources. A laundress from 50 miles away might use completely different approaches to the same stains. Your pipe clay has dried, and you're brushing it off the fabric like Agnes showed you. The clay comes away in a fine powder, and with its success, most of the grease. There's still a faint shadow where the stain was, but it's probably 90% gone. You feel a brief moment of accomplishment before Agnes appears with another stained item and the cycle begins again. Edith's lye treatment on the altar cloth has worked. Mostly. The honey wine stain is gone, but the fabric is noticeably weaker in that spot. She holds it up to the light and you can see the weave is looser, the threads slightly frayed. It'll tear eventually, she admits, but not before Sunday service. That's a future problem. Medieval laundry was full of these trade-offs. Solve today's problem, create tomorrow's disaster. Thomas appears with news. The Lord wants his hunting clothes for tomorrow. They're the ones covered in deer blood and mud from last week. Everyone stops. Deer blood is notoriously difficult to remove, especially when it's had time to set. Mud is manageable, but blood, especially old, dried blood, requires immediate soaking in cold water with salt, then multiple treatments with various agents. Last week's blood stains are practically permanent. Agnes squares her shoulders. Bring them here. We'll do what we can. What they can do, apparently, is a multi-stage assault. Cold water soak with salt and soap, then urine treatment, then if needed, lye application on the stains directly. The hunting clothes arrive, and they're spectacular in their filth-dried blood crusted on the sleeves, mud caked on the legs, sweat stains yellowing the underarms. This is a day's work minimum, and it needs to be done by morning. The stain removal team shifts into high gear, everyone taking a section of the hunting outfit and working simultaneously. You've got a sleeve with dried blood, and you're soaking it in cold salt water, watching the blood very slowly start to release. It's going to take hours. Hours you don't have. But you keep working because what's the alternative? The sun is starting to lower outside the high windows, and the light is changing. Evening is approaching, and you've still got stains that laugh at you, fabric that refuses to come clean, and the impossible task of making hunting clothes covered in death presentable for a lord who probably won't even notice the effort. Agnes looks at the remaining work, looks at the fading light, and makes a decision. We work into the night. Bring lamps. The Lord wants his clothes, so the Lord gets his clothes. Nobody argues. Nobody complains. This is just how it is in the medieval laundry housework until the job is done. Regardless of time, regardless of exhaustion, regardless of the fact that you've already been working for 12 hours. The stains continue their resistance, and you continue your assault. It's a battle measured in inches, in faint lightnings of dark spots, in the slow transformation of filthy to merely stained to acceptably clean. And every victory is temporary, because there's always more fabric waiting, always another impossible stain, always another deadline. The wet fabric is getting heavier by the hour, and you're about to learn that cleaning was only half the nightmare. Drying is a logistical catastrophe waiting to happen. Agnes is surveying the mountains of washed, beaten, boiled, and stain-treated items with the expression of a general planning an impossible military campaign. Right? She announces, "Time to get everything outside before we lose the light. And pray to every saint you know that it doesn't rain tonight." You're carrying your first load of wet linens, and the weight is shocking. A single bedsheet, when waterlogged, must weigh 40 pounds. You've got 3 of them draped over your shoulders, and your knees are already buckling. The path from the laundry house to the drying field is maybe 50 yards, but it might as well be a mile. Your feet are squelching in those leather shoes that haven't been dry since dawn, and every step sends pain shooting through your shoulders, those same shoulders destroyed by beating stones and cauldron stirring. The drying field is a large open area behind the household's main buildings, and it's already crowded with wooden frames, stretched ropes, and bushes that serve as impromptu drying racks. This is where the real anxiety begins, because wet laundry outside is vulnerable to everything: weather, theft, animals, and the simple disaster of items blowing away in the wind. Medieval laundry workers were basically meteorologists, constantly checking the sky, feeling the air for humidity, trying to predict if their work was about to be ruined by forces beyond their control. Agnes is directing traffic like a battlefield commander. Heavy items on the frame sheets, blankets, tablecloths, light items on the rope shirts, underlinens, veils, and someone watch for the pigs. Last time they got in here, we lost 3 days of washing to mud and pig filth. The fact that wandering livestock is a legitimate threat to the laundry operation tells you everything about medieval working conditions. You're draping a wet sheet over a wooden frame, basically 2 posts with crossbar sand, trying to spread it evenly so it dries without wrinkles. This is harder than it sounds because the wet fabric is heavy enough to bow the crossbars. And if you don't distribute the weight properly, the whole frame tips over. You're adjusting, red raping, stepping back to check, and Agnes is already yelling at you to work faster because there's 50 more items waiting. Margaret is working the rope lines, and her technique is worth watching. She's got clothespins, simple wooden pegs that haven't changed design in centuries, and she's using them to secure lighter items to ropes strung between posts. But it's not random placement. She's spacing everything perfectly to allow air circulation, because items that touch while drying create damp spots that can mildew. She's doing this while pregnant, exhausted, and probably fighting every instinct to just collapse. But the work demands precision regardless of your physical state. Here's something historians love to debate: whether medieval people understood the science of evaporation or just knew empirically that certain arrangements dried faster. They definitely knew that spreading fabric increased surface area and improved drying. They knew that wind and sun helped. They knew that items dried faster on warm days than cold ones. Whether they understood the physics behind it or just observed patterns over generations, that's the academic question. Either way, their practical knowledge was sophisticated. Edith is wrestling with a massive wool blanket, trying to spread it over the largest drying frame available. Wet wool is spectacularly heavy. This blanket probably weighs close to 100 pounds. She's enlisted Thomas to help, and together they're manhandling it into position, the frame creaking under the weight. If this breaks, Edith warns the frame as if it can hear her, "I'm going to personally burn you for firewood and enjoy every moment." The sun is dropping toward the horizon, and there's a growing urgency to get everything positioned before darkness falls. Once it's dark, you can't see what you're doing, can't judge spacing, can't check that items are properly secured. You're moving faster, carrying more per trip, and your body is screaming in protest. Your back feels like someone's driving nails into your spine with each load. Your shoulders have transcended pain and entered some new realm of suffering that doesn't have a name yet. Thomas is now tasked with the specialized job of weight distribution. He's got a basket of smooth stones, and he's placing them on the corners of sheets and tablecloths to keep them from blowing away. The stones have to be heavy enough to secure the fabric, but not so heavy they tear it. He's developed an eye for it, grabbing stones of just the right size without even thinking. Some of these stones have been used for this purpose so long they've been worn smooth by fabric and weather. Agnes appears next to you with a wooden mallet and stakes. The frames need securing, she says, demonstrating by driving a stake into the ground next to a frame post and tying them together with rope. Wind comes up at night sometimes. Last month we lost half the drying to a storm frame's tipped. Fabric dragged through mud. 3 days of work ruined in minutes. She's securing each frame like she's preparing for battle, because in a way, she is. The battle is against nature, and nature doesn't care about your laundry deadlines. You're hammering stakes, and the ground is harder than expected. Each strike of the mallet sends vibrations up your already destroyed arms. Some stakes go in easily. Others hit rocks or roots and require multiple attempts. You're sweating despite the cooling evening air, and you've added blisters from the mallet handle to your collection of injuries. The medieval laundry worker's body is just a map of accumulated damage. Here's a quirky historical detail. Some wealthy households had specialized drying gardens with bushes and hedges planted specifically for draping laundry. Rosemary and lavender were favorites because they were sturdy enough to hold wet fabric and fragrant enough to add scent during drying. The Lord's household has several rosemary bushes, and you're draping delicate items over them, creating a strange landscape where clothing and foliage merge. It would be beautiful if you weren't too exhausted to appreciate it. Margaret is working on the delicate items, the fine linen veils, the embroidered altar cloths, the ladies' silk undergarments. These can't be beaten by wind or weighed down with stones. They need gentler treatment. She's laying them flat on specialized drying tables, wooden frames with fabric stretched across them that allow air circulation while keeping the items perfectly flat. Each piece needs to be smoothed by hand to prevent wrinkles, because ironing silk and fine linen is even more dangerous than what you've been through today. The sky is turning colors now, orange and pink streaking across the horizon, and it would be beautiful if it weren't also terrifying. Those colors might indicate good weather, or they might be the last light before a storm. Agnes is squinting at the clouds, reading them like an ancient text. Might hold, she mutters. Might not. We'll set watch tonight. 2-hour shifts. Someone needs eyes on the drying at all times. Setting watch means someone has to stay awake all night, checking for weather changes, securing items that work loose, chasing away animals, and preventing theft. Yes, laundry theft was common enough that it warranted overnight guards. Fine linens and quality clothing had real resale value, and a thief could make off with items worth months of wages if the drying field was left unattended. Edith volunteers for the first watch, probably because her hands hurt too much to sleep anyway. Wake me for the midnight shift, Margaret says, and you realize with growing horror that you're probably getting the dawn shift, which means maybe 3 hours of sleep before you're back out here watching wet laundry in the dark. Thomas has finished his stone placement and moved to a new task, the stretching treatment. Certain items, particularly linen tablecloths and sheets, need to be stretched while drying to prevent shrinkage and maintain their shape. He's got a specialized frame with adjustable pegs, and he's mounting a tablecloth on it, pulling it taut in all directions, then securing it with the pegs. Too much tension and the fabric tears. Too little and it dries wrinkled and shrunken. He's 12 years old and he's performing textile engineering by feel. The drying field is nearly full now, and it's a surreal sight. Dozens of wooden frames holding sheets and blankets, ropes strung with shirts and undergarments, bushes draped with delicate items, all of it fluttering gently in the evening breeze. It looks like a strange forest where the trees grow fabric instead of leaves. And every single piece represents hours of back-breaking labor, chemical burns, and suffering. Agnes is doing a final inspection, walking the rows and checking each item. She adjusts spacing here, resecures a corner there, replaces a stone that's too heavy. Her standards are exacting because she knows the household steward will inspect everything in the morning, and any items that are improperly dried, wrinkled, or damaged will result in punishment for her. So she passes that pressure down to all of you, creating a chain of anxiety that starts at the top and flows down to the lowest worker. You're carrying what you hope is your last Loata basket of the Lord's shirts when disaster strikes. Your foot catches on a root, and you're falling, the basket flying from your hands, shirts scattering across the ground. Some land on clean grass, some land in mud. One lands partially in a puddle of standing water. Time seems to stop as you watch weeks of work potentially ruined in seconds. Agnes is there immediately, her face a mask of fury. Pick them up. Check for damage. If any of these are ruined, she doesn't finish the threat because it's not necessary. You're scrambling, gathering shirts, desperately checking each one. The ones on grass are fine. The ones in mud are dirty but salvageable with another washing. The one in the puddle is soaked but undamaged. You've dodged disaster by inches. Back to the washing trough with the muddy ones. Agnes orders coldly. And you're doing them yourself, after the drying is secure, before you sleep. So now you've got extra work added to an already impossible day. Your 3 hours of potential sleep just became 1. Maybe. The light is fading fast now, and you're working almost by feel, securing the last items, checking that everything is weighted or staked or tied. The drying field has to be perfect because nature gives no second chances. A storm tonight means everything gets rewashed. Thieves tonight mean financial disaster. Animals tonight mean starting over. The anxiety is palpable. Edith is settling in for her watch, wrapped in a cloak, sitting on a stool with a clear view of the entire field. She's got a wooden rattle to raise alarm if needed, and she's prepared for a long, uncomfortable night of vigilance. Medieval work didn't end at sunset. It just changed forms. Agnes gathers everyone who's not on watch for a final briefing. Tomorrow morning, everything comes down and gets checked. Items that are dry go to pressing. Items that are still damp get moved to the indoor drying racks. We're already behind on the pressing, so expect a long day. A long day after this long day after the previous long days. The medieval work cycle doesn't include rest. It just includes different types of exhaustion. You're trudging back to the laundry house to rewash the shirts you dropped, and your body is beyond protesting. The simply shutting down in stages. Your feet are numb. Your hands don't close properly anymore. Your back has locked into a permanent hunch. But there's still work to do, because there's always work to do in the medieval laundry house. The washing trough awaits. Cold water this time because the fires are banked for the night. You're scrubbing shirts in the dark. By feel, your destroyed hands moving on autopilot. The mud comes out easily enough it's recent. Not set. But it still takes time you don't have. Energy you've already spent 3 times over. Outside, you can hear Edith starting her watch, the wooden rattle clicking occasionally as she checks its function. Above, the stars are coming out, indifferent to the human struggle below. And somewhere in the main house, the Lord and Lady are probably asleep in those sheets you spent all day cleaning, completely unaware of the small army of broken bodies required to maintain their comfort. You finish the shirts, hang them quickly on indoor racks, and finally, mercifully, you're allowed to stop. Agnes points to a corner where other workers are already collapsed. There are no beds, just straw on the floor and thin blankets. 3 hours, she says. Then you're on watch. Don't be late or there'll be consequences. You collapse onto the straw, not bothering to remove your wet clothes or shoes. Sleep comes instantly, but it's not restful, it's the unconsciousness of total physical depletion. And in what feels like seconds but is actually 3 hours, someone's shaking you awake. It's time for your watch shift. The drying field awaits in the darkness, and you've got 2 hours to keep everything safe while your body screams for sleep you can't have. Morning arrives with cruel efficiency, and you've barely slept before Agnes is shaking everyone awake. Pressing day, she announces grimly, and the collective groan from the other workers tells you this is somehow worse than everything you've endured so far. Your body feels like it's been broken and badly reassembled. The watch shift in the cold night air has left you stiff and aching in new ways you didn't think possible. But there's no time for recovery because the pressing irons are already heating over the fires. The irons themselves are terrifying solid chunks of metal, each weighing maybe 6 or 7 pounds, with a handle that's supposed to protect your hand but absolutely won't. Thomas has been heating them in the coals since before dawn, and they're glowing with a dull red heat that makes the air around them shimmer. There are 6 irons in rotation. While you press with one, the others heat. When your iron cools too much to be effective, you swap it for a fresh one from the fire. This means you're constantly moving between the pressing table and open flames, carrying superheated metal, trying not to set yourself or the fabric on fire. Agnes demonstrates the technique with the confidence of someone who's been doing this for decades and has the scars to prove it. She wraps the iron's handle in thick cloth multiple layers, because the handle gets almost as hot as the iron itself. She lifts it from the fire using a specialized hook, tests its temperature by spitting on it. The spit should sizzle and evaporate instantly but not pop violently. Then carries it to the pressing table where a linen shirt is laid out. Watch the angle, she instructs, pressing the iron down onto the fabric. You can hear the sizzle as the hot metal contacts the slightly damp linen. See the steam rising in a cloud around her hands. Too much pressure and you scorch. Too little and the wrinkles stay. And never, ever stop moving. Keep the iron gliding or you'll burn a hole straight through. She's moving the iron in smooth strokes, and you can see the wrinkles disappearing, the fabric becoming crisp and flat. It looks almost easy. It's not easy. You're handed your own iron, and the weight of it shocks you. 6 pounds doesn't sound like much until you're holding it out in front of you, trying to control it precisely while it radiates enough heat to cook meat. Your first attempt on a pillowcase is a disaster. You press too hard in nervousness and leave a brown scorch mark. Agnes appears instantly, examining the damage. Nobleman's pillowcase, she says flatly. That's coming out of your wages. Try again, and this time think about what you're doing. The financial penalty is devastating. You've been working for 16 hours and you've just lost whatever meager pay you might have earned. But there's no time to process this because you've got another pillowcase waiting, and this time failure means you might not eat this week. You lift a fresh iron from the fire, wrap the handle carefully, and approach the fabric like it's a sleeping dragon. Your second attempt is better but still not good. The wrinkles aren't fully coming out because the iron isn't hot enough, it's already cooling. You swap it for a fresh one from the fire, and this one is almost too hot. You can feel the heat radiating up through the wrapped handle, burning through the cloth layers. You press carefully, moving in smooth strokes like Agnes showed you, and slowly the wrinkles disappear. Success? Barely. Here's what historians rarely mention about medieval pressing. It was one of the most dangerous jobs in the laundry house. Burns were inevitable, minor ones daily, serious ones monthly. Workers developed a tolerance for heat that seems almost superhuman by modern standards. They would test iron temperature with their fingers, handle hot metal with minimal protection, and work inches from open flames for hours. The injury rate was spectacular, and there was no concept of workplace safety regulations to protect them. Margaret has taken a pressing station despite her pregnancy, and watching her work is anxiety-inducing. She's leaning over the table, belly pressed against the edge, wielding a hot iron with practiced movements. Every few minutes she has to stop and stretch her back, one hand supporting her lower spine. Nobody offers to take over because everyone has their own quota to meet. The medieval workplace ran on quotas, and piecework: you pressed a certain number of items or you didn't get paid. Pregnancy, injury, illness, none of it excused you from the numbers. Edith is working on the delicate items, the silk veils, the fine linen altar cloths, the embroidered vestments. These require a different technique entirely. The iron can't be as hot because silk scorches at lower temperatures than linen. The pressure has to be featherlight because embroidery can be crushed and ruined. She's using a pressing cloth, a piece of thin fabric laid between the iron and the delicate attempt to diffuse the heat. Even with all these precautions, she's sweating with concentration, knowing that one mistake with the bishop's vestments could mean serious consequences. The pressing room is rapidly becoming as hot as the cauldron area was yesterday. You've got 6 irons rotating through the fire, each one radiating heat. The fire itself is substantial. It needs to be hot enough to keep metal glowing. The windows are closed to prevent wind from disturbing the delicate fabrics, so there's no ventilation. The temperature is climbing past uncomfortable into genuinely dangerous territory, and you've been working for maybe 20 minutes. This goes on for hours. Thomas is managing the iron rotation, and his job is deceptively complex. He has to judge when each iron is at optimal temperature, too cool and it doesn't press effectively, too hot and it scorches. He's using tongs to rotate them in the coals, ensuring even heating. He's calling out which iron is ready next. Number 3 for heavy linen. Number 5 for delicates. Number 2 needs more time. He's orchestrating a dangerous ballet of heated metal, and one mistake could result in someone pressing with an iron that's too hot or too cold, either scorching fabric or wasting time. You're on your 5th item, a tablecloth that seems to have infinite wrinkles when you make your first serious mistake. The iron catches on an embroidered section and you instinctively pull, dragging the hot metal across the fabric. It leaves a shiny streak where the heat has partially glazed the linen fibers. It's not a hole, not quite a scorch, but it's definitely damage. Agnes sees it immediately. That's the lady's personal table linen, she says, her voice deadly quiet. The one she uses when dining with nobility. You just made it unusable. The financial calculation is instant and crushing. That tablecloth is worth more than you'll earn in a month, maybe 2 months. You might be working off this debt for half a year. But Agnes doesn't fire you. She can't afford to lose a worker mid-pressing day. She just makes a note on her wooden tablet and points to the next item. The debt will follow you, a weight added to all the physical suffering. Historians still argue whether medieval workers truly understood the economic trap they were in or simply accepted it as the natural order. The wage system was designed to keep workers perpetually in debt to their employers. Mistakes like yours weren't just punished, they were financially leveraged to ensure continued labor. You couldn't quit because you owed money. You couldn't negotiate because you had no leverage. You just worked and hoped to break even eventually. The morning wears on, and you're developing a grim rhythm. Lift iron from fire, wrap handle, test temperature. You're using the spit method now, having given up on gentler approaches. Carry to table, press in smooth strokes, feel it cooling, swap for fresh iron, repeat. Your arms are screaming from holding the weight at the precise angle needed. The heat is making you dizzy again. You thought yesterday's cauldron work was the peak. But this is different, more concentrated, more relentless. Margaret makes a sound, a sharp gasp, and drops her iron. It falls onto the pressing table, burning a perfect iron-shaped scorch into the wood. She's cradling her hand, and you can see the burn already forming a red welt across her palm where the handle cloth slipped and she touched hot metal directly. Edith rushes over with a bowl of cold water, but you all know it won't help much. Burns like that take weeks to heal, and Margaret doesn't have weeks. She has the rest of today and tomorrow and the day after that. Agnes examines Margaret's hand with the clinical detachment of someone who's seen this 1,000 times. "Can you still grip?" she asks. Margaret nods, tears streaming down her face. "Then you keep working, but switch to lighter items. Edith, give her your delicate station. You take her heavy linens." The work simply redistributes around the injury. There's no concept of medical leave, no rest period for burns. You work through the pain or you lose your position. The delicate items are actually harder than heavy linen. You're discovering. Edith has moved to your station, and you've taken over the silk and fine linens. The iron has to be barely warm hot enough to smooth but cool enough not to damage. The pressure has to be so light you're barely touching the fabric. It's exhausting in a completely different way, requiring total concentration when your brain is already fried from exhaustion and heat exposure. You're pressing a silk veil, moving the iron in careful strokes. When you notice the fabric is sticking slightly, horror dawns. The iron is too hot. The silk is beginning to melt. You pull back immediately, examining the damage. There's a faint sheen where the silk has partially glazed. Not quite ruined, but definitely affected. You wait for Agnes to notice, to add more debt to your growing total. But she's busy with her own crisis. Someone else has scorched something else, and the pyramid of mistakes is growing. Here's a quirky detail about medieval pressing that rarely gets mentioned. Some households used multiple types of irons for different fabrics. Heavy irons for linen and cotton, lighter ones for silk, specialized ones with ridges for creating pleats. The wealthy had collections of irons the way modern people have specialized kitchen tools. But most laundry operations, like this one, made do with a standard set and relied on worker skill to adjust technique. The iron doesn't change. You do. Thomas calls out a warning. "Fire's getting low. Need more fuel." But there's a problem. The wood supply is running out. Someone has to go fetch more from the woodshed, which means leaving the pressing area, which means falling behind quota. Agnes makes the calculation. You're already in debt from your mistakes, so you're the expendable one. "Fetch wood," she orders, "and be quick about it." You're running through the household grounds toward the woodshed, your body protesting every step. Your lungs are burning from the heated air you've been breathing. Your arms feel like they're about to fall off from wielding heavy irons. But you load up with firewood as much as you can carry and stumble back toward the laundry house. Each piece of wood is rough, finding the splinters still embedded in your hands from yesterday's beating work. New pain layers over old pain in an archaeological record of suffering. Back at the pressing area, things have deteriorated. The irons have cooled too much without adequate fire, and everyone's waiting for you to return with fuel. Agnes's expression promises that this delay will also come out of your wages somehow. Thomas grabs the wood and starts building up the fire, but it takes time for the irons to reheat properly. Time is money, money you don't have, debt you're accumulating. While waiting for the irons to heat, Agnes has everyone doing preparation work, laying out the next items to be pressed, checking already pressed pieces for quality, repressing anything that doesn't meet standards. You're examining a shirt you pressed an hour ago, and in the better light you can see that the collar isn't quite right. There are faint wrinkle lines still visible. Agnes spots them too. Again, she says simply, "Nothing is good enough. Everything can be criticized, redone, used as justification for wage deductions." The irons are finally hot again, and the pressing resumes. You've been at this for hours now, and the repetitive motion is creating new injuries. Your wrist is starting to swell from the constant gripping and maneuvering. Your shoulder already destroyed from yesterday's making grinding sounds when you move the iron. Your fingers are blistering where they grip the wrapped handle, even through the cloth layers. The medieval worker's body is just a machine designed to break down under use. Edith is talking to herself as she works, a running commentary that might be prayer or might be her losing her mind. Smooth and glide. Smooth and glide. Don't scorch the linen. Smooth and glide. It's a mantra worn into her brain by decades of this work. You find yourself starting to do the same. Don't burn it. Don't burn it. Keep it moving. Don't burn it, and you realize this is how people cope. They retreat into repetitive thoughts because thinking about the larger reality is unbearable. Margaret is crying silently as she presses delicate items one-handed, her burned hand clutched against her chest. The tears are probably from pain, but they might also be from exhaustion, or despair, or the simple, overwhelming nature of trying to do intricate work while your body is failing. Nobody comments on the tears. There's an understanding that sometimes you cry while you work, and that's just another thing that happens. The afternoon sun is streaming through the windows now, adding natural heat to the already unbearable temperature from the fires and irons. You're soaked with sweat, your clothes clinging to you uncomfortably. Salt is crystallizing on your skin again. Your lips are cracked and bleeding, and you've still got hours of pressing ahead because the pile never shrinks. It just slowly transforms from wrinkled to smooth, one scorching, dangerous iron stroke at a time. Agnes announces a quota check. We need 40 more pieces pressed before the steward's inspection at sunset. That's 8 pieces per person in the time remaining. Anyone who doesn't meet quota doesn't get paid today. Anyone who scorches another piece pays for it and doesn't get paid today. The math is simple, and cruel work faster with more precision while exhausted and injured, or suffer the consequences. You grab your iron, test it with spit, and turn to the next item on your pile. It's one of the Lord's formal shirts, the kind he wears when meeting with other nobility. The pressure is immense. You smooth it onto the table, position your iron, and begin to press. The wrinkles disappear under heat and pressure, and for just a moment, you create something perfect from something rumpled. Then the iron cools, and you have to swap it, and the cycle continues, relentless and unending. The sun is finally lowering toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would be beautiful if you had the energy to appreciate them. You've been working for nearly 16 hours again. Your body has moved beyond pain into a kind of numb autopilot, and Agnes is conducting the final inspection before the household steward arrives. Every piece you've washed, beaten, boiled, stain-treated, dried, and pressed is being examined with ruthless attention to detail. Agnes holds up a tablecloth to the fading light, looking for wrinkles, stains, or damage. She finds a faint crease along one edge barely visible to anyone except her trained eye and adds a mark to her tablet. Acceptable but not perfect. She mutters. The steward will note it. This is your work being judged. And even though it's acceptable, you know that acceptable but not perfect means some small deduction, some minor penalty that adds to your growing pile of debt. The steward arrives precisely at sunset, a thin man in fine clothes who looks at all of you like you're mildly distasteful furniture. He doesn't greet anyone, doesn't acknowledge the work that's gone into this moment. He simply begins his inspection, picking up items randomly, examining them with an expression of perpetual disappointment. This is a man whose job is to find fault, and he's very good at his job. He holds up one of the Lord's shirts, the one you pressed with trembling hands this afternoon, and examines it minutely. You hold your breath. He checks the collar, the cuffs, the body. He holds it to the light looking for thin spots or damage. Finally, mercifully, he nods and sets it in the approved pile. You've passed one test. There are dozens more items to go. Margaret's work comes under scrutiny next to delicate veil. she pressed one-handed while fighting through the pain of her burn. The steward notices immediately. "This corner is imperfect," he announces, showing Agnes a section that's slightly less crisp than the rest. "Unacceptable for the lady's use." He sets it in the rejected pile, which means it needs to be done again, which means more work, which means Margaret just worked through injury for nothing. Margaret's face crumbles, but she doesn't argue. There's no arguing with the steward. He represents the Lord's authority, and his judgments are final. Agnes makes another mark on her tablet, this one next to Margaret's name, and you know that rejection will affect her pay. The medieval employment system wasn't just cruel. It was designed to extract maximum labor while providing minimum compensation. Here's what historians debate about medieval household management: whether stewards were genuinely ensuring quality or simply performing power. The evidence suggests both. Quality control was real, noblemen and women expected perfect linens, but the inspection process was also about maintaining social hierarchy. The steward's authority came from his ability to reject work, to find fault, to keep workers anxious and subordinate. Your suffering wasn't just a byproduct of the work. It was part of the system's design. The inspection continues, item by item. Some pieces are approved with grudging nods. Others are rejected for reasons that seem arbitrary: a wrinkle too faint to see, a whiteness that's not quite white enough, a fold that's slightly uneven. Each rejection is a dagger, because it represents hours of work that won't be compensated. Or worse, work that will need to be redone on top of tomorrow's already impossible load. Edith's altar cloths pass inspection perfectly, and you see her shoulders sag with relief. Those hours of careful lye bleaching, of gentle pressing with barely warm irons, of constant anxiety about damaging irreplaceable religious items, all of it was worth it because the steward approves. She'll get paid for this work. At least. Small victories matter when you're drowning in defeats. Thomas's fire management is being evaluated now. Indirectly, the steward is checking items for scorch marks, for areas that were pressed with irons that were too hot or too cool. Each mark reflects on Thomas's ability to maintain proper temperatures. The boy is standing rigid with anxiety, his soot-covered face showing genuine fear. At 12 years old, he understands that this inspection determines whether his family eats adequately this week. The steward finds a scorched section on a pillowcase of your mistakes from this morning and holds it up accusingly. Unacceptable. Careless work. He looks directly at you, even though there's no way he could know you were responsible. Maybe Agnes told him, or maybe he just picks the newest, weakest-looking worker to blame. Either way, you're marked. This worker's wages are forfeit until the replacement cost is recovered. He announces. The calculation is swift and devastating. You've worked 2 days, 32 hours of brutal labor, and you won't see a single coin. The debt from your mistakes exceeds whatever wages you might have earned. You'll be working for free until the cost of damaged items is paid off, which could take weeks. And during those weeks, you'll still need to eat, still need shelter, which means going further into debt to the household for basic necessities. It's a spiral designed to trap you. Agnes is nodding along with the steward's pronouncements, her face impassive. She's not going to defend you or argue for leniency. Her job is to manage the laundry operation, and that means enforcing the household standards regardless of worker suffering. She's as much a victim of the system as you are, but she's also its enforcer. The medieval workplace created these impossible positions where workers oppressed each other just to survive. The steward moves to the final category. The Lord's hunting clothes that you all worked on desperately last night and this morning. He examines the sleeve where you spent hours battling deer bloodstains. The blood is mostly gone, maybe 95% removed, but there's still a faint brown shadow visible in certain light. He points to it. Blood stain remains. Inadequate treatment. Another rejection. Another mark against the collective work. But here's where the cruelty gets creative. The steward acknowledges that blood stains on hunting clothes are expected and acceptable for informal wear, but he's rejecting these because the Lord might wear them when hunting with noble guests, and therefore they need to be perfect. The standards shift based on hypothetical future use, and you're expected to anticipate and meet those shifting standards without being told what they are. Historians still argue whether medieval workers internalized these standards or resented them. The evidence suggests both. Simultaneously, workers took genuine pride in quality work. You can see it in Edith's relief when her altar cloths pass, but they also understood that the standards were often arbitrary exercises in power. You could resent the system while still trying desperately to meet its demands, because the alternative was starvation. The inspection is finally complete. Out of maybe 80 items, 12 have been rejected. That's actually a good ratio. Agnes looks cautiously pleased, but those 12 rejections represent dozens of hours of work that won't be compensated and will need to be redone. The approved items are being packed into baskets for return to the household. The rejected ones stay in the laundry house, a pile of shame and extra work. The steward is leaving now, and he pauses at the door to deliver his final assessment. The quality remains adequate but shows decline from previous weeks. The Lord expects improvement. This is particularly cruel because the quality hasn't declined. If anything, you've all worked harder than ever, but the criticism serves to keep everyone anxious, striving, afraid of losing their positions. Management through fear was a cornerstone of medieval labor relations. Agnes waits until the steward is gone before she speaks. Right? The rejected items get redone tonight. No exceptions. The collective groan is immediate but suppressed. You're all too exhausted to protest loudly. And tomorrow we start the weekly washing for the monastery. They're sending 40 monks' robes, 20 altar cloths, and God knows what else. Tomorrow will be just as bad as today. And the day after that. And the day after that. You're looking at the pile of rejected items, calculating how many more hours of work they represent. The blood-stained hunting sleeve needs another urine soak and probably a lye treatment. Margaret's imperfect veil needs repressing with an iron that's exactly the right temperature. Several other pieces need minor corrections that will still take time you don't have. The work never ends. It just transforms into different types of suffering. Margaret is crying again, openly this time, her burned hand clutched against her pregnant belly. I can't do this anymore, she says, her voice breaking. I can't keep doing this. Edith moves to comfort her. But what comfort is there? They're all trapped in the same system. Agnes is silent, probably running calculations about whether Margaret will make it through the pregnancy while maintaining her work quotas. And if not, who will replace her? Thomas has collapsed near the fire, his young face aged by exhaustion and stress. He's supposed to help with the rework tonight, but he's barely conscious. Agnes looks at him and makes a rare, merciful decision. Boy can sleep. He's done enough today. It's the first moment of kindness you've witnessed in 2 days, and it's so unexpected that you almost weep from the shock of it. You're gathering the rejected items, preparing to start the rework, when your body finally hits its absolute limit. Your vision tunnels, dark spots crowding in from the edges. Your knees buckle, and you're falling, catching yourself on the edge of a washing trough. You're going to faint, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The medieval worker's body can only endure so much before it simply shuts down. Agnes is there immediately, not with comfort but with cold practicality. Head between your knees. Breathe slow. She's seen this 1,000 times. Workers collapsing from exhaustion, heat, dehydration, chemical exposure, or the simple, overwhelming nature of the work. You follow her instructions, and gradually the darkness recedes. You're not going to faint, at least not right now. But you're not sure if that's a blessing or just an extension of suffering. Can you work? Agnes asks, and you nod because what else can you do? Then get to it. The hunting sleeve first, that's the priority. The Lord wants it by morning. You're standing on shaking legs, moving toward the urine bucket, preparing to retreat bloodstains while your body screams for rest that won't come. Edith and Margaret are starting on the other rejected items, working in exhausted silence. The laundry house has taken on a nighttime quality, dim, shadowy, filled with the sound of water and fabric and quiet suffering. Outside, the world is dark. Inside, you're all trapped in a cycle of work that seems designed to break you slowly, day by day, until there's nothing left. Here's a quirky detail that feels important right now. Medieval laundry workers had a patron saint, Saint Veronica, who, according to legend, wiped Christ's face with a cloth. They would pray to her on particularly difficult days, asking for intercession, for easier stains, for fewer rejections. Some households had small shrines in laundry houses where workers could offer quick prayers between tasks. There's no shrine here, but you find yourself praying anyway, wordlessly, desperately, to anyone who might be listening. The hours crawl by. You work on the hunting sleeve, Agnes beside you offering terse instructions. The bloodstain is lifting, slowly, through another round of urine treatment and gentle beating. Margaret's veil is being repressed with an iron that Edith is monitoring obsessively for perfect temperature. The other rejected items are being corrected, one by one, in a race against exhaustion and the approaching dawn. Somewhere around midnight, Agnes allows a brief break. There's bread hard and stale and ale warm and weak. You're so hungry that the bread tastes like a feast. The ale cuts through some of the chemical taste that's been coating your mouth since yesterday. You're sitting on the wet floor, too exhausted to care about comfort, just grateful to be off your feet for 5 minutes. How long have you been doing this? You ask Edith, your voice hoarse from breathing chemical fumes and steam for 2 days straight. She considers the question, her damaged hands wrapped around a cup of ale. 33 years. She says finally, started when I was 10. This is all I know. 33 years of this work. You've barely survived 2 days, and you can't imagine 2 weeks, let alone 3 decades. The break ends too soon, and you're back at it. The work continues in an exhausted haze where time loses meaning. You're moving through tasks mechanically: soak, scrub, beat, check, repeat. Your hands are beyond feeling. Your back has locked into permanent pain. Your shoulders have surrendered entirely. You're just a machine made of meat and bone, slowly grinding yourself down in service of cleanliness. The first hints of dawn are showing through the high windows when Agnes finally declares the rework complete. The hunting sleeve is clean enough to pass inspection, you hope. Margaret's veil is perfectly pressed, probably. The other items have been corrected to the best of your collective ability. You're all too exhausted to know if it's actually good enough, but it's all you have left to give. 3 hours of sleep, Agnes announces. Then we start the monastery washing. 3 hours. You've been awake for over 20 hours, worked for most of them, and you get 3 hours before it starts again. The medieval work cycle is a wheel that crushes everything in its path, and you're caught in its rotation. You collapse onto the straw in the corner, not bothering to remove your soaking wet clothes or ruined shoes. Sleep claims you instantly, but it's not restful, it's the unconsciousness of total physical depletion. Your dreams are filled with beating stones and boiling cauldrons and stains that laugh at you. Your body twitches and jerks as exhausted muscles spasm. 3 hours of this is supposed to prepare you for another day. But here's the thing about the medieval laundry house: it doesn't care about preparation, readiness, or human limitations. It just demands, endlessly, that you produce cleanliness from filth using methods that destroy you in the process. And tomorrow you'll wake up and do it all again, because the alternative is starvation, and the work is never, ever finished. The last thing you're aware of before sleep fully takes you is the sound of Agnes already moving around, preparing for the next day's work. The woman probably hasn't slept more than 4 hours in decades. This is her life. This is Edith's life. This was probably their mother's lives before them. Generation after generation of women feeding themselves into the machine of cleanliness. Their bodies the price of noble comfort. And somewhere in the great house, the Lord is sleeping peacefully in sheets you destroyed yourself to clean, completely unaware of the human cost of his comfort. That's the medieval laundry Hoshan invisible industry of suffering that kept the visible world of nobility clean, pressed, and presentable. Your hands are ruined. Your back is broken. Your lungs are scarred from chemical fumes. Your skin is burned from lye and scalding water. You've worked 2 days and earned nothing but debt. And tomorrow, it all starts again. The darkness is settling in now, soft and complete. Your breathing is slowing, deepening, matching the rhythm of exhausted workers around you. The laundry house is quiet except for the occasional pop of dying embers in the fire. Outside, the world continues, indifferent to your suffering. But here, in this moment, there's finally stillness. Your body is learning what medieval workers knew in their bones, that labor could consume you entirely, that systems could trap you perfectly, that survival sometimes meant just enduring until sleep. The washing, the beating, the burning, the persinjits all fading now into the gentle static of exhaustion. Your destroyed hands are still. Your screaming shoulders are quiet. Even the chemical burns have stopped their angry throbbing. Tomorrow will come with its impossible demands. But tomorrow is not yet here. Right now, there's just the darkness, the straw beneath you, and the slow, steady pull toward sleep that your body desperately needs. The medieval laundry house has taken everything it can from you today. Let it wait until morning for more. The last sounds you hear are the gentle breathing of other workers, the settling of old wood, and somewhere distant, a bell tolling the hour. Your eyes close, the world softens, and finally, mercifully, there is rest.